If you're a parent, teacher, or school leader, and you're sick and tired of the frustration, anger, and unfair treatment of children at high risk in our public schools, then perhaps it's time for all of us to do something about it. In this podcast, Dr. Amplifying Berry brings you tips, tools, strategies, and tactics to build successful solutions while touching, moving, and inspiring all of us to transform our schools so that every child thrives. Here's your host, Dr. Berry.
Knowledge has been a passion with me during my whole life, one which has not lost its charm to the present day. Those words from Queen Liliuokalani, the last monarch of the Kingdom of Hawaii. Welcome back, Equity Warriors. I'm Almitra Berry. I'm thrilled to have you join me today for a crucial conversation about celebrating and integrating Asian American, Native Hawaiian, and Pacific Islander heritage in our schools. I also want to thank you for your continued commitment to educational equity. And for those of you who are Patreon subscribers, a special thank you. You know, it's your support that helps fuel this movement. And if you're not already part of the community, please head on over to patreon.com/3E podcast to join us. It is the month of May, and it is Asian American, Native Hawaiian, and Pacific Islander Heritage Month. Did you know that despite representing more than 7% of the U.S. population, Asian American, Native Hawaiian, Pacific Islander stories are often missing from our K-12 curriculum content? Just imagine, and maybe you don't have to imagine, maybe you are, but close your eyes and think for a minute. See yourself as a student in a classroom, a child who never sees their culture, your culture, reflected in the history books, the literature, the math, contributions to science and technology. No one ever looks like you. No one from your ethnicity or culture is represented in classroom discussions. How would that experience shape your sense of belonging or identity? Now, for those of you who are from other ethnicities, marginalized groups and communities, you may already know what that feels like. For my white allies, my European listeners, it might be a little bit different for you because you are always represented in content. But the underrepresentation of Asian American, Native Hawaiian, and Pacific Islander students in K-12 curricula is compounded by the diversity within the group itself. It bothers me, honestly, every time I have to group Asian American, Native Hawaiian, and Pacific Islander into 1 month, because I already know that there are numerous distinct ethnicities, communities, and cultures within that group. Pacific Islander isn't one island. It is not one culture. Asian American is not one ethnicity. It is a broad spectrum of ethnicities. East Asian, you have Chinese, Korean, Japanese, and more. South Asian, Indian, Pakistani, and more. Southeast Asian, where we group Vietnamese, Filipino, Cambodian, Pacific Islander. Well, sometimes we group Filipinos into Pacific Islander, but you also have Native Hawaiian, Samoan, Tongan. In California alone, my home state, AANHPI students make up 15% of the population and 11.8% of English learners, multilingual learners, speaking 43 different languages and dialects at home. 43. Now, when I was a classroom teacher in California, I had wonderful experiences with my students from these various ethnicities. Some of you who've listened to me or heard me speak about this before or read one of my books know that I was the faculty advisor for the Vietnamese club when I taught at the high school level. So I had an opportunity while immersed in their culture to understand the differences in the cultures of many of the Southeast Asian students in our community, because California has a large Southeast Asian community. as a classroom teacher when I had students who were Cambodian, Filipino, Vietnamese, Laotian, Chinese. Who am I missing? As I sort of scan the faces that sat out in front of me, I knew that their cultures, their languages were distinctly different, but not everyone knew that, understood that. I had someone not too long ago in a workshop session say something about someone being Asian, and I corrected them and said, she's Korean. And they said, how do you know? And I said, because she's Korean. You would not mistake me, a Black woman, as being Irish. She's Korean. She's not Japanese. I think they said she was Chinese or something. And again, they asked, how do you know? And I said, because of her physical attributes, she presents as Korean. And in fact, she is Korean, which I also knew from her name. AANHPI communities are diverse. They are linguistically diverse. They are culturally diverse. And they are one of the most linguistically diverse groups in the U.S. So if we look at multilingual learners in our schools from AANHPI as a group, some of the languages you may have in your community, in your schools, would be Vietnamese, Mandarin, Cantonese, Filipino or Tagalog, Punjabi, Urdu. This linguistic diversity does present its own unique challenge. I get it. Trust me, I get it. I remember the day that I had a student come into my classroom. The counselor brought her in and they told me she spoke Urdu. And I said, what's that? Long time ago. I was much less culturally competent back then. It was a language at that time I had never heard of before. And the first thing that popped into my mind is, I can handle the Spanish because I can speak that. I've got plenty of Spanish speakers in my classroom. I had a word or two in my vocabulary from Vietnamese, but most of my students who were Vietnamese also spoke English. So it was about developing their English, not necessarily having to explain something in their home language. It is a unique challenge because we don't often have, frequently we do not have access to culturally relevant teaching materials or training to access or to address these diverse students' needs effectively, especially when it comes down to something like presenting a concept that is foreign to them in a language that they have not yet mastered. Something to think about and something to work on. As I said, it bothers me that we clump all of these different ethnicities together and make it seem like it's just one big group of people when they are not. So why do we do that? Not we, you, and me, but the royal we, the powers that be. So the term AANHPI is a pan-ethnic classification, and it is used for the convenience of data collection. It's used for the convenience of policy discussion. The problem with that, though, is that it oversimplifies the distinct identities, the people within that greater group. When we aggregate data for Asian American and Pacific Islanders, we mask the disparities between subgroups. I noticed that years ago in teaching, based on the linguistic differences, number of years, parental education, how they came to the country, some subgroups. And for me in my classroom, the Southeast Asian students who were Cambodian as a subgroup had greater achievement gaps. Some of it was because they were basically pre-literate as they came to the country. There were a number of things that were impacting my Cambodian students that were not impacting my Chinese or Japanese students or my Filipino students who had been there for generations. We have subgroups who may have higher educational attainment or income levels. We have other subgroups that face significant barriers because of socioeconomic status and immigration history. And so to put them all into one group is harmful. Treating Asian American, Native Hawaiian, and Pacific Islander students as a homogeneous group perpetuates stereotypes. That's where you get this model minority myth. Here's one you've probably heard. Drives me nuts. All Asians are good at math. I have actually heard a teacher say, but he's Asian. He should be good at math. What's wrong with, there's so many things wrong with that statement. When we have these, buy into these, perpetuate these myths about what someone is or should be good at just based on ethnicity, it obscures the challenges that underrepresented subgroups like Southeast Asians and many Pacific Islanders may have. When we fail to disaggregate data, both educators and policymakers, so teachers, administrators, school board members, state board of education members, and I'm talking to you. When we don't disaggregate that data, we risk overlooking disparities in academic achievement, disparities in language proficiency, disparities in access to resources that are specific to those students who need it. When we ignore the diversity within that greater group, we deny students the opportunity to see their unique cultural history reflected in curriculum. It is a form of erasure that can negatively impact their sense of identity and belonging in our schools. Layer onto that a lack of culturally competent teaching practices, and we make it worse. We exacerbate the inequities and academic outcomes for our students, particularly our AANHPI students who are multilingual learners who require targeted support. Hey there, Equity Warriors. I want to take a quick moment to share something exciting with you. You know how passionate I am about equity in education, right? Well, I've created a special space, a safe space, where we can dive even deeper into these crucial topics. It's our Patreon channel, and I'd love for you to join me there. Here's why it's so awesome. As a Patreon subscriber, you'll get access to exclusive content that I will not share anywhere else. I'm talking additional insights, workshops like you would get in regular professional learning sessions, resources that can really amplify your impact in education. But it's more than just extra content. By subscribing, you are directly supporting our mission. You're helping to create more valuable discussions and resources that you've come to love. You're part of the change we're making in educational systems. And let me tell you, our Patreon community, it is something special. It's a place where passionate educators and advocates can come together, share ideas, and drive real change. So if you're ready to take your commitment to educational equity to the next level, I'd be thrilled to have you join me. Just head over to patreon.com/3E podcast. That's patreon.com/3E podcast. Remember, your support means the world to me, and it helps me continue this important work. Together, we can create the educational system all our students deserve. Thanks for considering, and now let's get back to the episode. But when we address this, I'm solutions oriented. We start addressing these complexities and advocating for disaggregated data collection and culturally relevant curricula. We all can better support our students, our AANHPI students specifically, support their academic success, support their socio-emotional development, and at the same time, foster an inclusive educational environment that is beneficial for all children. So if you are not already reading The Culturally Competent Educator, which just came out in the month of March, my book, pick it up. I'm going to give you several tips right from the book. Okay, so how you can do better. We'll know more so we can do better. So in the book, I talk about the harm of bias, stereotyping, and misrepresentation in instructional materials. And these are practices that don't not only damage learners' self-esteem, but they perpetuate ignorance among their peers by representing skewed or an incomplete narrative. So one of the tools in the book is an equity checklist for curriculum content, something for you to use to evaluate your instructional materials and see whether or not there is true impartiality, to see whether or not your materials are free from stereotypes and that your children are represented in those texts. So if you use that checklist, you can identify or begin to identify and eliminate biased content outside of the book. You use that as your basis. But then start highlighting diversity. Look for, and again, I will be providing, or by this time, I've provided some materials for you on the Patreon channel. So just make sure you go there. You have to be a member. So history, language, and culture this month showcase the histories, the cultures of the various groups. Okay, and avoid presenting a monolithic view of Asian. All right. And then challenge some bias. Have discussions in your classroom among your peers within the faculty, discussions that address unconscious bias and stereotypes that may be held. Now, if you're at the high school level and you're in a school system that allows you to have free speech, I can't believe I actually have to say that. But where you can have these conversations at the high school level, do that. If you're at the high school level and you're in a position where you can bring leaders in, your student leaders from various ethnicities, have that conversation. That is a great thing that you can do to support all learners and increase the level of inclusion that's felt. All right, tip number 2 is to foster empathy. So in my book, I advocate for creating safe, inclusive classrooms where learners can feel respected and valued. I provide you a roadmap to do that. One of the tools that I provide is called a reflective dialogue circle as a format, a way to encourage open discussions about diverse perspectives. And it stresses the importance of culturally relevant instruction that connects learners' lived experiences to the curriculum. So what can you do? If you're not already reading the book, if you're not already in book study, do that. But just start having dialogue in your classrooms. Use those the reflective dialogue circles to discuss AANHPI experiences like historical discrimination. If you're in the high school, at the high school level, particularly if you're teaching American history, U.S. history, or American government, there should be some discussion about the Chinese Exclusion Act. If you're in California, the California laws that were on the books years ago that prevented Asians from owning property, from immigrating, from what was considered or what the white people in power would say was loitering or vagrancy. Okay, there were a lot of laws on the books that we don't talk about. This is a good time to have those discussions. And there are contemporary issues like anti-Asian hate crimes, Asian hate. Celebrate contributions. Highlight the achievements of Asian American, Native Hawaiian, and Pacific Islander peoples across the disciplines. Look at the arts, the science, politics, history, government, whatever your department is, your area is. If you are in the social sciences, focus on history and politics and government. If you're a science teacher or tech teacher, focus on science and tech. And of course, if you're in the arts, there is something, literature, for every educator to focus on. You want to foster admiration and understanding to help combat hate and discrimination. Create mirrors, create windows. Make sure that your learners can see themselves reflected in the curriculum while gaining windows into other people's experiences. So this isn't just about supporting your Asian American, Native Hawaiian, and Pacific Islander students, but fostering empathy among your white, Black, and Latino students for their Asian peers. Tip number 3, you want to make sure that we have authenticity. I talk in the book that I truly underscore, like multiple underscore, bold letters, highlight the importance of using primary sources and collaborating with members of the community to ensure authentic representation. I also emphasize media literacy as a critical skill for evaluating those sources. So you want to use archives, oral histories, go to your community histories, community voices that have insight into the history of their people in that community. So it's close, it's relevant, it's connected. Oral interviews with AANHPI individuals to provide authentic perspectives. You can partner with local organizations or leaders. Let them co-create some lessons or events. You don't have to do it all. There are others out there that will help you. And in engaging students in media literacy, you want to make sure that you are teaching them to critically analyze representations of diverse communities in their textbooks, in their media, and that includes social media. Number 4, you want to integrate the 4 equity indicators. Now, there's a CARDI framework in the book. If you're familiar with my second book, Affecting Change for Culturally and Linguistically Diverse Learners, where I introduced the CARDI framework. It's repeated in this book, so we're focusing on that 3rd step of curriculum content and emphasizing impartiality by ensuring impartiality being one of the 4 equity indicators, by ensuring diverse representation in instructional materials. Equity indicator 3 has the question, or asks the question, who has representation in your curriculum? So you can conduct a very simple diversity tally of your instructional materials to see what the representation is like. Are AANHPI voices represented? Are they underrepresented? Good question to ask. So you can't change books in mid-year. I get that. You can't change books till adoption season. I get that. But you can supplement your existing curriculum with some authentic resources when you see a gap. Identify the gap and then fill it. And then tip number 5, we should be doing this every day, 24/7, year-round. Embed cultural competence into your daily practice. Don't limit it to special occasions or heritage months. Don't do cultural competence for Asian American, Native Hawaiian, Pacific Islander peoples just in the month of May. It should be every day, every lesson, everything you're doing. You need to have that lens. So focus it or incorporate that history and that culture into subjects year-round. Elementary multi-subject teachers, you should be doing this across the areas year-round. But this month, since we are focusing this month, pick an Asian American inventor and infuse that, integrate that into your STEM. Pacific Islanders have strong oral traditions. Look at that in your English class instead of literature. Again, student-led initiatives are wonderful, but they require adults to help make sure it happens. So encourage some student-led organizations of heritage celebrations or creating projects, if you're doing project-based learning, that explore AANHPI contributions. Teaching AANHPI heritage with sensitivity is in good alignment with cultural competency. And you'll see that as you work through the culturally competent educator and the focus on equity, inclusion, and cultural awareness. Avoid stereotypes, foster empathy, ensure authenticity through collaboration and primary resources so that you can create meaningful learning experiences that honor the richness of each of those communities. If you need something else to do, I would ask that you advocate for ethnic studies legislation in your states. In fact, I'm going to make that a specific ask for people who sit on school boards, those of you who work in departments of education, our allies that are just in here doing the work because it's the right thing to do for children, but you don't have a regular role in public education. Advocate for ethnic studies legislation. Look at the legislation in California, although right now some of that is under attack. Illinois and California, where they mandate ethnic studies. Find yourself a local legislator who will introduce a bill to mandate AANHPI history as a graduation requirement. Look at tools and resources to enrich your classrooms and empower your students to appreciate the diversity of AANHPI experiences. That means you've got to go on to Patreon. And then join me again next episode. If you've got a question, topic you'd like covered, special request, whatever it is, text me. Use the link in the show notes. I want to hear your voice. And before we part ways, remember, don't worry about the things you cannot change. Change the things you can no longer accept. And that's a wrap for today's episode of the 3E Podcast. Now, here's how you can make a real difference. First, smash that subscribe button. It's free. It's easy. Just do it. Second, share the show with anyone you know who cares about education. And third, consider becoming a supporter of the show. Together, we're not just talking about change, we're making it happen. Make a donation today to be part of that mission and change, and I'll catch you next time.